Hi guys, I wanted to make this video because it's a really important topic and it's something that is affecting me and it is affecting you. And that is the greatest heist in human history. Now, what I mean by that sounds quite extreme, doesn't it? But there are many forms of wealth, okay? So typically most people consider to be, if you're rich, you've got lots of money. By money, it's pounds in the UK or dollars in America and stuff like this. Obviously, you've got assets as well. So what you own has a large value. You've got Bitcoin, which is more a decentralized currency. And you've got most recently sort of social influence. So if you've got a lot of people who know you, that's powerful. And on YouTube, you can quantify that as subscribers, views, and, Twitch is followers and, whether you're affiliate or whatever else, okay? But there are something that's even more important than that right now for most people in terms of getting any type of value, and that is data. Your data is being used, and in some arguments to be made on the internet, your data is being stolen. It is being used to train these large AI models. Now, to protect myself from any law cases here, I'm not going to be specific in what companies this relates to, but it is pretty obvious. A lot of jobs are being replaced by automation, so people are losing their livelihoods. It's harder to get work because those who are trying to get a job, these entry-level roles, they no longer exist because they've been replaced by these automated technologies. And these automated technologies are trained on large data sets, information. Whether you willingly give them that information or not is obviously up for debate, and a lot of companies are suing larger companies that take this data and use it for their own ends. And these companies, they charge money for you to use their platforms. And so basically they're making money off your data. This is causing a massive issue because it will rise unemployment. It will create opportunities for different people. And then you could argue, well, they're using it as fair use, right? But the thing is, even when you go on websites like social media platforms, there's a lot of you have to accept cookies for your data to be used a certain way. You have to go through certain terms and conditions to allow these companies to use your data. Now, I don't know what these terms and conditions apply to when it comes to using these LLMs, for example. And the issue is they're replacing your jobs. And they're not taxed on that. They just get to use your information. And this has become a serious problem. Now, people like Andrew Yang, for example, who I think he tried to get in office quite a while ago, and he was a big supporter of universal basic income. Now, what do I mean by that? So basically, universal basic income is this idea that if there's not enough jobs to go around, that everyone should get a minimum amount of money to survive on. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this because of my situation. I want to be working 16 hours a day. I operate on work. And because I'm out of work at the moment, I'm not saying, therefore everyone should be on universal basic income. Believe me, it is horrible. I need purpose, okay? And so I define my purpose by, going my own way, so to speak. But I do believe that there should be some form of reparation or taxation on these big companies that are misusing data or using data in a fair use way, because ultimately, I don't want my data being used to the means of me not be able to get a opportunity for an income, right? And I'm not a proponent of socialism, but I do believe in social economic policies that help towards a capitalistic society. That means to say that, if a company has a monopoly over something that you used to have, but you're not able to sell for whatever reason, there should be a taxation on that company that distributes that wealth to those who are being made unfairly, proportionately less fortunate as a result of that data being used. So what do I mean by that? So basically, these companies should be taxed a proportion of the data being used to fund stuff like universal basic income, in my opinion. This is the only way I can see people being able to survive on this popular system replacing their jobs. Of the result of not doing so is feudalism, and slavery potentially, because how else are people going to survive? And this is why, for example, in my situation, I leverage not just trying to get an income, but I leverage building a social following, and I leverage different other systems of creating value, because I believe that with the replacement of data being more valuable than the fiat, you need to get a value source that isn't money per se, because how else are you going to compete with data being more valuable than a salary? because these new technologies are replacing salaries, aren't they? And I think a lot of people aren't realizing this. They don't understand this technology. A lot of people are still comfortable in their respective jobs. A lot of jobs aren't replaced yet for a lot of people. It was expected in America to displace around 10 to 15% of the total workforce. That's America. And that is a ridiculous amount of people. If 15% of people are displaced because of these technologies and so they can't get a job, then there needs to be an interim solution that allows them to survive, eat, and have some basic food and essentials in order to upskill, if they can upskill. That's the other issue as well when using these systems, is that, for example, in my situation, I'm learning Python and how to code. So now I can take advantage of my own LLMs and use them to further, allow me to compete. Let's not forget, I think it's David Johnson's lecture on the perplexity model of these different technologies. And this was like 5 years ago, where basically we predicted how effective an LLM was predicting the next word given a sentence before it compared to a human and NLPs. NLP is a natural language processor, which are various technologies, including LLMs. But in generally speaking, NLP was 1 in 200 effectiveness in terms of predicting the next word. And LLM was 1 in 20. And a human was 1 in 12, predicting the next word given a sentence before it. So obviously context to some extent. This was 5-6 years ago. If you think for 1 second that some of these systems can't be more effective in predicting the next word than you, then you're delusional. And so you're not going to compete with them. So if you're trying to compete with them to get a job, it's not going to work. And so you have to then realize, well, chasing money for money's sake for a salary isn't future-proof. You're competing against data, and data is now more valuable than the fiat. So, and this video is a bit of a rant, but it is what we are going through is the greatest heist in history, because essentially what's happening is that data is becoming more valuable than the fiat, and people need to accommodate as such. And if I was to give some advice out there, and this is advice that I'm learning myself, I don't have all the answers, but I think that people should look at other sources of value that isn't necessarily bound to the dollar or the pound or whatever else. So that is social popularity, and that is somehow using data to facilitate a means of getting value. And I don't know how to do that yet. That's why I'm learning code. Join me on Twitch, follow this channel to see how I get on that. But as the more I learn about code and these technologies, the more I realize is that people are running out of time and they need to find means of creating themselves an income that's not specifically linked to their respective currencies, like pound and stuff like that. But let me know what you think in the comments below, guys, or have I just ranted on for 8 minutes? But yeah, cheers.